As we cross the threshold of 60, the biological contract our body has maintained for decades begins to shift into a more precarious phase where the most lethal threats are no longer defined by sharp pain or obvious symptoms, but by their absolute silence. The medical community refers to these as silent killers because they bypass the body's traditional alarm systems, such as inflammation-induced pain or visible physical distress, allowing them to erode the foundation of your health for years without a single warning sign. Understanding these three specific diseases is not just an academic exercise, but a fundamental requirement for survival in the senior years. The first and perhaps most pervasive silent killer is high blood pressure, medically known as hypertension. While many people believe they would feel a headache, a racing heart, or a sense of dizziness if their pressure were dangerously high, the clinical reality is that you can walk around with stage 2 hypertension for a decade and feel perfectly fine. This is why it is often called the silent killer. It does its damage at the microscopic level, specifically targeting the delicate endothelial lining of your arterial walls. Imagine your arteries as a series of high-pressure hoses. When the pressure is chronically elevated, the inner lining becomes scarred and thickened to protect itself. This scarring creates a rough surface where cholesterol and calcium can easily latch on, forming plaques that narrow the pathway for blood flow. Over time, your heart must pump harder and harder against this resistance, leading to left ventricular hypertrophy, where the heart muscle becomes thick and less efficient. Because there are no pain receptors inside the arterial walls that trigger when pressure is high, the first symptom many seniors experience is a catastrophic event like a massive stroke or a sudden heart attack. At 60, your blood vessels have naturally lost some of their elasticity, a process called arterial stiffness, which makes them even more vulnerable to the relentless pounding of high-pressure blood flow. This pressure doesn't just affect the heart, it acts like a jackhammer on the tiny, fragile vessels in your kidneys and your eyes. Chronic high blood pressure is the leading cause of kidney failure and adult-onset blindness, yet in the early and middle stages, there is zero physical discomfort. The danger is compounded because many seniors have a normal reading during a quick checkup, but suffer from what we call nocturnal hypertension, where the pressure fails to drop during sleep, causing 8 hours of invisible vascular damage every single night. Vigilance through consistent monitoring is the only way to unmask this silent predator. It is a mistake to equate the absence of pain with the absence of disease, especially when the biological stakes are this high. By the time you feel the effects of hypertension, the structural damage to your cardiovascular system is often already deep and irreversible. Moving directly into the second silent predator that haunts the senior population, we must address the invisible escalation of type 2 diabetes and chronic insulin resistance. In the younger years, the body is highly efficient at processing glucose, but after the age of 60, the pancreas often begins to slow its production of insulin, and the cellular receptors that allow sugar to enter your cells for energy become increasingly deaf to its signals. This creates a state of chronic hyperglycemia, where sugar remains trapped in your bloodstream, circulating through your system like microscopic shards of glass. The tragedy of diabetes in seniors is that high blood sugar does not hurt. You cannot feel your blood becoming syrupy, and you cannot feel the slow glycosylation of your proteins and red blood cells. By the time a senior experiences the classic symptoms like extreme thirst or frequent urination, the disease has often been progressing silently for 5 to 10 years. During this silent window, the excess sugar is chemically bonding to the collagen in your arteries, making them stiff and brittle. It is also attacking the microvasculature that feeds your nervous system. This is why many people over 60 realize they have a problem only after they notice a loss of sensation in their toes or a slow healing wound on their foot. At that point, the silent phase has ended, and the nerve damage, known as peripheral neuropathy, has already become a permanent fixture of their physiology. Furthermore, silent hyperglycemia is a primary driver of cognitive decline. The brain is the most glucose-demanding organ in the body, but when blood sugar is chronically elevated, it leads to neuroinflammation and the buildup of amyloid plaques, which are the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease. This is why many in the medical community now refer to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. You may feel mentally sharp today, but if your fasting glucose or your A1C levels are creeping up without intervention, your brain is essentially being slow cooked in an environment of metabolic toxicity. The silence of this disease is its greatest weapon, as it allows for the total erosion of the metabolic system while the individual feels completely healthy. This leads us to the third silent disease that claims thousands of lives over 60, which is hyperlipidemia, or the invisible accumulation of arterial plaque. Much like blood pressure and blood sugar, you cannot feel your cholesterol levels. There is no physical sensation associated with the buildup of fatty deposits along the walls of your coronary arteries. We must look at the specific nature of low-density lipoprotein, or LDL, particularly when it becomes small and dense. These tiny particles are small enough to slip under the endothelial lining of your arteries, where they become oxidized and trigger an immune response. Your white blood cells rush to the scene to eat the oxidized fat, turning into foam cells that eventually form a hard, calcified plaque. This process, known as atherosclerosis, can narrow your heart's blood supply by 70 or 80% without causing a single chest pain or shortness of breath. The senior body is particularly at risk because the natural repair mechanisms of the arterial walls are slower, and the cumulative effect of decades of diet and environmental stress finally reaches a tipping point. The danger here is not just the narrowing of the vessel, but the stability of the plaque itself. A silent, soft plaque can rupture at any moment, triggering the formation of a blood clot that instantly shuts off blood flow to the heart or the brain. This is why we see so many individuals who have excellent physical stamina and feel great suddenly succumb to a massive cardiac event. The silent nature of cholesterol means that unless you are looking at advanced lipid panels that measure particle size and inflammation markers like C-reactive protein, you are effectively flying blind. By the age of 60, the margin for error disappears, and the body no longer has the resilience to buffer the effects of these silent metabolic shifts. These three diseases, hypertension, hyperglycemia, and hyperlipidemia, often work in a lethal synergy called metabolic syndrome. They feed off each other, with high blood sugar damaging the vessels that high blood pressure is already pounding, and high cholesterol filling in the cracks. Together, they form a silent conspiracy against senior longevity that requires a proactive, diagnostic-heavy approach to overcome. Waiting for pain as a signal to see a doctor is a strategy that often leads to a diagnosis that is delivered in an emergency room rather than a clinic. Our critical examination into the silent killers of the senior years, we must address the strategic roadmap required to unmask these hidden threats and the specific physiological interventions that can stop their progression. For an individual over 60, the greatest danger lies in the wait-and-see approach, because as we have established, these diseases do not provide the courtesy of pain or discomfort until they have reached a stage of systemic failure. The first step in your defensive strategy must be a shift in how you view diagnostic data. A standard annual physical that only checks your basic numbers is often insufficient to catch the early stages of arterial erosion or metabolic dysfunction. You must advocate for a coronary artery calcium score, or CAC score, which is a specialized CT scan that looks for actual calcified plaque in your heart's arteries. Unlike a cholesterol test, which only measures what is floating in your blood, a KC score tells you exactly what is already stuck to your walls. This is the definitive way to unmask the silent progression of atherosclerosis and can provide a wake-up call that changes your health trajectory overnight. Similarly, we must look beyond a simple fasting glucose test and prioritize the hemoglobin A1C and fasting insulin levels. These tests provide a 3-month average of your blood sugar and a measure of how hard your pancreas is working to maintain that balance. If your insulin is high, even while your sugar looks normal, you are in a state of silent insulin resistance that is actively damaging your vascular system and your brain. Beyond testing, we must focus on the mechanical and chemical interventions you can perform daily. The most powerful tool at your disposal for controlling the silent surge of blood pressure is the regulation of your sodium to potassium ratio. In the senior body, the kidneys become hypersensitive to sodium, which causes the body to retain fluid and increases the volume of blood the heart must push. By aggressively increasing your intake of potassium-rich whole foods like avocados, leafy greens, and bananas, you are providing your body with the biological antidote to sodium. Potassium tells the kidneys to flush out excess salt and relaxes the walls of your blood vessels, providing a natural, non-pharmaceutical drop in pressure. This is coupled with the necessity of maintaining vascular shear stress through consistent, low-impact movement. When you walk, your blood flow creates a gentle friction against the arterial walls, which stimulates the production of nitric oxide. This gas is the master signal for vasodilation, keeping your silent vessels flexible and resistant to the scarring that leads to hypertension. For someone over 60, even a 20-minute brisk walk acts as a medical treatment that rinses the arteries and improves the sensitivity of your insulin receptors. We also have to address the silent impact of chronic inflammation, which acts as the fuel for all three of these diseases. Inflammation is what turns a stable plaque into a lethal rupture, and what turns mild insulin resistance into full-blown diabetes. At this stage of life, your diet must be strictly anti-inflammatory, prioritizing high-quality omega-3 fatty acids and polyphenols from colorful vegetables. These compounds act as the fire extinguishers for the low-grade cellular heat that erodes your organs. You must also be vigilant about the quality of your sleep, as obstructive sleep apnea is a frequent but silent driver of nighttime hypertension. If you are gasping or snoring in your sleep, your brain is triggering a massive release of stress hormones that spike your blood pressure while you are unconscious, causing damage that you cannot feel but which manifests as a stroke risk in the morning. Addressing your airway health and ensuring deep restorative sleep is a foundational pillar of senior longevity. As we conclude this report, the message is clear. Your health in your 60s and beyond is no longer a passive state of being, but a proactive result of your diagnostic vigilance. You cannot rely on your physical sensations to tell you if you are healthy. You must rely on the data provided by your blood work, your scans, and your daily monitoring. The silent nature of these diseases is only a threat if you choose to remain in the dark. By identifying the early shifts in your blood pressure, your glucose, and your lipid profile, you are taking the power back from these predators. Your body has an incredible ability to stabilize and even partially reverse these conditions if you provide the right nutritional and mechanical environment. Do not let the absence of pain lull you into a false sense of security. Instead, let the knowledge of these silent processes empower you to become the most informed advocate for your own longevity. Your heart, your brain, and your kidneys are the engines of your life, and they require a level of maintenance that matches the decades of service they have provided you. Stay proactive, stay informed, and never stop looking for the truth behind the silence, because your vitality and your future depend on your willingness to act before the warning signs ever appear. This concludes our special deep dive into the silent diseases that threaten senior health. Stay vigilant and keep moving toward a life of strength and clarity.